So about a year ago, I made a video covering the 5 French mother sauces, and in that video I showed you how to prepare each one of these sauces, and I also briefly went over some of the smaller sauces that are derived from each of these mother sauces, but I didn't actually make any of these smaller sauces individually. At the time I kind of felt like the mother sauce topic was a large enough topic to take up its own video, but what I want to do now is do a deeper dive into each one of these sauces individually as their own video. So today we're going to be doing bechamel sauce and some of the small sauce derivatives that are associated with that, as well as some practical uses for you to use at home. So we've got a lot of work to do in this video, so what do you say we get to it? Okay, for a quick review on this, each one of the 5 French mother sauces at its base level is a liquid plus a thickening agent of some kind. And for bechamel, the liquid is milk and the thickener is white roux. And it's named after Louis de Bechamel, who was steward to King Louis XIV of France. And the original version of bechamel was made by adding cream to veal velouté, and velouté sauce is another one of the 5 mother sauces. Okay, starting with a sauce pot over medium heat, add 4 tablespoons or a half a stick of butter, and once that melts, work in 2 ounces of all-purpose flour. Stir that together with a whisk, and since this is white roux that we're making, you only want to cook this for 1.5 to 2 minutes while keeping it moving, which is going to help cook everything evenly, and it's also going to help prevent the flour from darkening as well. A very, very light toasting is the goal here. Then we're going to gradually work in 1 quart of milk. And I place emphasis on the word gradually. One of the biggest issues that novices have with a sauce like this is preventing the formation of lumps. So you want to slowly work the milk in, initially forming a paste, then continue to slowly add more and more milk to dilute the paste. And once you get to a certain point where it does become a little bit more liquidy and runny, you can add the milk more rapidly. Just make sure to go easy with it at the beginning. And a good ratio to keep in the back of your head for sauces that are thickened with roux is that 1 ounce of roux will thicken up 1 cup of liquid, or on a larger scale, 1 pound of roux will thicken 1 gallon of liquid. So for each one of these mother sauces, in addition to its base components of a liquid plus a thickener, there's also a couple of flavorings that are associated with each one. And with bechamel, that's nutmeg and something called an onion piqué. And to make an onion piqué, all you do is you set a bay leaf on an onion and you stab a clove through it to hold it in place. And the idea behind this is that it's easier to fish out when you're done. But we're going to be straining this thing out, so all I'm going to do is just drop these in and call it good. So with the onion piqué in the pot, we can also add a dash or 2 of nutmeg along with a bit of salt for seasoning. Then bring the sauce to a full boil for the starch within the roux to properly thicken the sauce. Then reduce the heat to a gentle simmer for 10 to 15 minutes to cook out any raw flour taste remaining. And this process is called gelatinization, and it's where starch molecules swell up and they eventually burst, and they release amylopectin into the sauce, giving it viscosity. And with the sauce all finished up now, we can strain it out through a fine mesh strainer, and this is not only going to help catch the onion piqué, but it will also help catch any possible lumps that might have formed earlier in the process. And you might be thinking, hey man, why the fuck should I care about the lumps if it's all going to be strained out anyway? Well, with the starch granules being trapped within the lumps, they don't have a chance to fully reach the necessary 212 degrees for full gelatinization. So the sauce might not be properly thickened to the right consistency, and it also might have somewhat of an uncooked flour taste, which is not what you want. The sauce should be thick enough to coat the back of a spoon and cling to foods. The French term for this consistency is nappe. Finally, give the sauce a taste and adjust for seasonings as needed. Okay, now that we've got our bechamel sauce finished up, traditionally in French cooking, these sauces aren't generally served just as they are. Rather, they're used to make smaller sauces, so each one of these mother sauces has its own family tree of derivative small sauces that come from it. But of course, there are exceptions to this rule. And here in North America, we've got something called white gravy or country gravy. And all that is just bechamel sauce plus a bunch of black pepper. And if you add some sausage to this and make some biscuits, that makes for a really good biscuits and gravy breakfast. But I've actually already made biscuits and gravy in another video. So for right now, let's make a breaded chicken cutlet with some country gravy. So I've got a boneless, skinless chicken breast here that I've flattened out the thicker end to about a 1/2 inch thick, and the only seasoning I'm using here is just salt and pepper. You could add a spice mix if you want, but I honestly don't think it needs it. And a boneless, skinless chicken thigh would also work here if that's what you have. But with the chicken finished up now off camera while you weren't looking, I've set up what's known in in the industry as a standard breading station. And there are 3 steps to this breading process, the first being flour, followed up by egg wash, and finally breadcrumbs. And I prefer using the more coarse Japanese-style panko breadcrumbs over the Italian-style breadcrumbs. They crisp up a little bit better initially, and they actually stay crispy a little bit longer as well. And overall, I think they just have a better texture. But that aside, with each step of this process, you want to make sure to get the surface thoroughly coated, but also remove any excess prior to placing the chicken onto the next plate for the next step. The only step that you actually want to get as much as possible is the last step, being the breadcrumbs, because that's the crispy surface, so really press that in and maximize that step. And another thing that's really cool about this breading process is that it's very sturdy and durable. These can actually be breaded a day or 2 in advance, and they can also be frozen. Just separate them individually on a sheet tray, then place them into the freezer until they freeze, then put them into a Tupperware container or a freezer bag, and they'll keep for several months. But for now, over at the stovetop, place a saute pan over medium heat along with a few sizable glugs of oil, and when the oil comes up to temperature, gently add the chicken into the pan. And since we're pan frying here and not sauteing, you can see that the action going on in the pan is a bit more on the mellow side of things. So while the chicken is over there doing its thing, let's get the gravy going. And the cool thing about this gravy is you really don't have to worry much about precise measurements. Just start with a little bechamel sauce, add as much or as little black pepper as you like, and to take this thing to the next level, I'm going to work in a little bit of chicken base. And since the jar recommends adding 1 teaspoon to 1 cup of water to make chicken stock, that's the ratio that I'm going for here, but I'm just kind of eyeballing it. And back over at the chicken, I can see the edges browning up, so I know it's time to flip it over and repeat the same thing on the other side. And with the chicken being relatively thin, it should be done cooking once both sides are browned up. So setting that aside, the gravy has also had a chance to heat up and dissolve the chicken base into it, so we're ready to get this thing plated up. You could just leave the chicken whole and cut it up as you're eating it. I'm gonna go ahead and slice it up though, because it does look better in pictures when you do that. And after getting this thing sliced up, this one is really simple. Just transfer the chicken over to a plate of your choosing, then simply top it off with this delicious country gravy. And another way to make this gravy, if it's the only thing you're intending to make with the bechamel sauce, is to split the milk in the recipe with chicken stock. So go 50% milk and 50% chicken stock. And that's actually what I usually do when I make biscuits and sausage gravy, or when I make a chicken fried steak with gravy. And to let you in on a little secret, that's what your favorite restaurants are also doing with their gravies as well. So the most notable bechamel sauce derivative, or at least the one that you've most likely heard of, is Mornay sauce, which is basically just a cheese sauce. And traditionally this cheese sauce was made with Gruyere and Parmesan cheese. Now in the modern world, it's pretty much used to describe any cheese sauce, because obviously when you put Mornay sauce on your menu rather than just saying cheese sauce, it sounds like it's more fancy. And Mornay sauce is used for a wide variety of preparations, including macaroni and cheese, lasagna, potato or vegetable gratins. It's served with poached fish. There are limitless possibilities with this sauce. And today we're going to be making a cauliflower gratin with it. And I've got 1.5 ounces of cheddar cheese and 1/2 ounce of Parmesan cheese here. So let's head over to the stovetop and make cauliflower gratin. Starting with a pot of water and a strong pinch of salt, heat that up to a boil, then add 10 ounces of cauliflower to the pot, and try not to make a mess like I did here. Then blanch the cauliflower for 5 minutes and strain it out. And over on the opposite burner, I've got 8 ounces of bechamel sauce that I've heated up, and after turning the heat off, I'll toss in all of the cheese and stir that up to combine it all together. So if you were taking notes here, the ratio that I'm using here is 4 parts bechamel to 1 part cheese, or 8 ounces of bechamel and 2 ounces of cheese. So with the sauce mixed up and the cauliflower ready to go, I've got a small baking dish set over a sheet tray to catch any possible spillover, and I'll toss in the cauliflower, then pour the sauce over the top. And you've got a few optional ideas before putting this thing into the oven. One, you could do what I'm doing here, which is to top it off with some extra shredded cheese, and the other would be tossing some breadcrumbs with a little bit of melted butter and using that as a topping. You could also just put it in as is. That part's up to you. Either way, once you get that figured out, load the pan into a preheated 375-degree oven and bake it for 30 minutes or until the top becomes golden brown. And vegetable gratins really are this simple to make, and try this with other vegetables as well. A mixture of cauliflower, broccoli, and carrots is really good. So bechamel sauce also has a couple of seafood-based derivatives as well, one of them being sauce cardinal, which is bechamel sauce plus lobster butter and truffles, and the other one is sauce Nantua, which is bechamel sauce plus crayfish butter. Now these butters are somewhat complicated to make, and they're really not all that practical practical for the home cook. So what I have here are some crawfish tails and some lobster base. And we're gonna use these to make kind of a makeshift combination of those two sauces. And if you wanted to simulate the truffle portion of it, you could use truffle oil or mushroom powder. And I am aware that truffle oil isn't actually made from truffles and some people don't really like it. I think it has good flavor. So if you want that truffle flavor into it, like I say, mushroom powder or, you know, the truffle oil, give that a shot and see what you think. Okay, to make this sauce, I'll combine 8 ounces of bechamel with 6 ounces of crawfish tails and 1 teaspoon of lobster base. And I'm just gonna eyeball that amount because if it's not exact, it's not that big of a deal. Give that a stir to combine and set the heat to low and let everything come together. And in the meantime, I've got a small flounder fillet and I'm gonna season both sides lightly with salt. And I've also made sort of a makeshift blackening seasoning by combining equal parts paprika, basil, thyme, cayenne pepper, and oregano. I'll sprinkle that over both sides, and over at the stovetop with the non-stick skillet, I'll set the heat to medium and add a small amount of oil to the pan. And as that heats up, I've got one more step before placing the fish into the pan, and that's to lightly dust the surface with all-purpose flour. And the reason for this is mainly that flounder is a very delicate and tender fish, and it will fall apart very easily even inside of this non-stick pan. So coating it with flour will give it a bit more sturdiness, and it's going to make it a bit more resistant to overcooking, and it's also going to help crisp up the surface as well. So once it's in the pan, it's only going to take about a minute to a minute and a half on each side, so this is not one of those dishes that you can just walk away from. And even with the flour coating added, you still want to be very gentle when slipping a spatula underneath to flip it over. And if you're not quite comfortable working with flounder, other fish like tilapia or cod are a bit more sturdy to begin with, and you could even use shrimp in this dish. So with the flounder finished up now, let's get this thing plated up. Gently place the fish onto the center of the plate, then grab your finished Nantua sauce and simply spoon it over the top of the fish. And for a little bit of added plate attractiveness, I've got some finely chopped parsley that'll sprinkle over the top. And there you have it, a delicious blackened flounder fillet served with sauce Nantua. But while we're at it, let's make some breakfast with this sauce, and we're gonna poach some eggs for that. So start with a pot of water, add a splash of vinegar and a few pinches of salt. And for poaching, you want the water just under the simmering point, so between 160 and 180 degrees. And this is a part where I tried doing a little bit too much for the camera. In the restaurant industry, eggs are poached most often in large pots of water, and as the water heats up, you make a giant whirlpool, drop the eggs in, and when the eggs float, they're done. But I realized when doing this, that only works when you have a large amount of water. It's not really working for me here. So for you at home, just crack the egg into a small cup or ramekin like I did here, and just drop them in for 4 to 5 minutes until the egg whites are set. Then fish them out with a slotted spoon or a skimmer like I'm using here, and with that, let's head over to the other side of the kitchen and get this thing plated up. Start by placing the 2 poached eggs onto one side of the plate, follow that up with a few slices of toast, then pour some of the Nantua sauce over the top of the eggs, and since I still have some of the stuff lying around, I guess I'll go ahead and garnish it with a little bit of parsley. And I really hope that you enjoyed this video that I've put together on bechamel sauce, and I do intend on doing the other 4 mother sauces as well at some point. But for now, we've reached the end of this video, so as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.